Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to this month's Portals Community Call. I'm Jason Gumper from MSDynamicsWorld.com. Really pleased to have you with us for this month's session. Every month we are hosted by Nicholas Hayduk of Engineered Code, and he is here as usual to take on document management and your questions and some updates. So just one other note, I think here, a couple notes. First, we do welcome your questions during the session. Look for the questions block in the webcast interface. We will be keeping an eye on that at any point. Just enter your questions in and Nick will be watching for that. And we are also recording today's event, so we will be sharing that with you after the session ends. So Nick, with that, I think I am ready to hand things over to you.
All righty. Hello, everyone. Welcome to, I think, what I was just told is the 45th Portals Community Call. The first time we're going to kind of redo a topic, and that's because there's been some updates and some other stuff that we can talk about, and it's a very popular topic. It's something get asked about a lot, and that is dealing with kind of files and documents when you're on Power Pages. So this is a rehash, or we're going to this was done back in December of 2021. So few new things that have happened over the last couple of years, and so that's what we'll talk about in our call today. So a quick introduction in case this is your first call. My name is Nicholas Hayduk. I am the president and software engineer with Engineered Code Consulting Inc. based here in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. I'm a Microsoft MVP, and I've been working with Power Pages essentially my entire career, having started my career with ADX Studio, which was the company that built Power Pages before being acquired by Microsoft. If we're not already connected on LinkedIn, please feel free to reach out. You can also follow us on Twitter. We've got our blog, we've got our YouTube channel. So we try and do a blog at least once a month. We do have tips every Tuesday on our YouTube channel. So lots of different content there. We have a podcast hosted with crm.audio. So all that stuff pretty much always focused on Power Pages, Power Platform stuff. So feel free to connect or reach out through any of those channels to get in touch with me if you'd like to. As always, want to say thank you and extend my appreciation over to Jason and the team at MS Dynamics World for their support on this, which I guess this would be our fourth year of doing this now. And so, yeah, couldn't have done it without Jason and his support. So really appreciate everything he does to, get the word out, host the call, all that sort of stuff. So thanks a lot, Jason. All right, what's our agenda? So we'll go through a little bit of news. Last time we met was early December. Not a whole lot happens between, over the holiday season there. So not too much in terms of news. I think we've got one thing. Then we will get into our topic, which, like I mentioned, is document management on Power Pages. And we'll talk about the timing of our next call. So let's take a look at our news. So the only thing that was really kind of new on the Power Pages blog is that the legacy portal admin center is no longer available. So that's great news because that means everything that we need to do now can be done directly within the Power Platform Admin Center, a much more modern experience. I find it to be a little quicker, and so it's great that they've migrated all the functionality that they need to into the Power Platform Admin Center. So everything you need to do with Power Pages, either using make.powerpages.microsoft.com or the Power Platform Admin Center. So goodbye and good riddance to the legacy portal admin center. The only other thing I did want to welcome back into the MVP fold, Nick Dolman. He had left the MVP because he had joined Microsoft, and he was the one responsible for all the great documentation that you would have seen regarding Power Pages. He's now back in the independent consulting world, and rightfully so has received his MVP designation back. So welcome to him, and yeah, you should see a lot of content from him. So great to have him back on this side of the fence, I guess. Sad that he's no longer doing all the documentation because he did a great job there, but I'm sure they'll find someone very, very capable to take up those reins. So, all right, that's kind of all we had for news. Like I said, with it being the holidays, there weren't a whole lot of announcements or anything. So I think soon, I think it's typically around this time, there'll be some release notes coming out. I don't know if they've announced exactly what day those are coming out, but typically in the next, I think probably in the next few weeks or so, it's usually January or February where they put out the release wave notes. So hopefully we'll have some news on that at some point here in the next few weeks, I'm thinking. Okay, so let's talk about today's topic, which is document management on Power Pages. And so in terms of document management, we're really talking about, we've got files, we got images, we got these files, and you know, often we want to be able to upload things or download these files, these assets when working with Power Pages. So what are our options when it comes to managing documents on a Power Pages site? So as I mentioned, we did cover this topic in December of 2021. So I'm not going to repeat all the things. You can go watch that recording if you'd like. The reason that we're taking this topic up again is because there are some different options. Some of the existing options, there's kind of some updates or some changes. Some of them have remained the same. So we'll just kind of say, hey, these ones haven't changed. Hey, there's something new. In addition to that, there is one thing that is an option. I didn't really discuss it in 2021, but I will bring up and kind of show you how that works as well here. So a few new things, some stuff I didn't cover before, but a lot of it is the same, and so I won't rehash that too much here. So what hasn't really changed? The functionality of your notes and portal comments. So the ability to use the timeline control if you use either multi-step forms or just regular forms, you know, a single-step form. If you're using one of those, you can use the timeline control. If you put the timeline control on your form, you're either going to say this is for notes or it's for activities. If you say it's for notes, then you can allow users to add notes, which includes, you know, the text as well as upload a file attachment. So if you have the requirement to allow someone to upload files, this was kind of the most traditional way to do it. You had a support case that you want someone to be able to upload, so, you know, an image about. What you'd do is you'd put either the notes or the activities on the case form, and you could allow people to you know, put in a comment and upload a file. Portal comments is very similar along those lines. Instead of using the annotation table in Dataverse, you're using the activities. So portal comment is a custom activity that was created as part of that's specific to Power Pages. And so if you put the timeline control on your form, and you say, hey, I want this to display activities, it's going to show you different activities. So it can show things like phone calls and tasks and emails and different sorts of activities. It will also can show portal comments. So if someone wants to add their own activity to it, what they're doing is they're creating a portal comment. And similar to what you can do with notes, you put in some text, you can upload a file, and that will be added to the timeline of that particular row, whatever row you're looking at in Dataverse on your Power Pages site. So notes and portal comments are relatively straightforward. I do have a few blog posts that kind of dives a little bit more into kind of getting those set up. There can be a little kind of places where you got to change, but if you're flipping between the notes and portal comments, that sort of thing. You got to set up the entity or the table permissions correctly so that if someone has access to the primary table, they need to have access to notes, and you got to make sure that there's like the append and the append to privileges and all that sorted out. But for the most part, it's pretty straightforward to allow someone to add attachments, add files, and then once the files are there, they can download them. So that's kind of the most basic way. We also have knowledge articles. You can add attachments, file attachments to a knowledge article, and that will be respected on Power Pages as well. So if you are using the Dynamics 365 templates for Power Pages and you're leveraging the knowledge article functionality and you're adding attachments to your knowledge articles, those can be added to your Power Pages site as well. So that one's really kind of only download only, but it is an option there for if you're trying to distribute files on your website. Knowledge articles is another option there. Okay, a couple of these, and these were kind of more the focus for the last call. A couple of these have minor changes. So I think when people think document management and they think Power Pages, one of the first places they'll go to is the SharePoint integration. And so the SharePoint integration hasn't changed a whole lot. It is kind of what it is similar to what I would have described back in December of 2021. I think the big change there is there's been essentially some performance improvements around one of the challenges that we'd have with the fetch XML link entity limit. Essentially what happens there is in order to enforce the permissions on the SharePoint documents, a fetch XML query is crafted, and if you had a lot of tables, a lot of different tables configured with SharePoint, all of those tables were included in the fetch XML query, so you'd quickly reach the limit, which is 10. You can have 10 link entity nodes in a fetch XML query. So behind the scenes, the Power Pages code would quickly reach that link entity limit, even if you had a relatively simple security structure. If you had more than 3 or 4 tables enabled for the SharePoint integration, you could run into some problems. So Microsoft did some work to streamline that so that when you're looking at one particular table, it only includes those tables permissions in the fetch XML query. So it doesn't matter how many additional ones you create. It's smart enough to only include the ones that it needs to there. So definitely an improvement there. Beyond that, it's still kind of the same experience that it's always been. It's leveraging the out-of-the-box integration between model-driven apps and SharePoint. So you create your SharePoint document locations, and whichever SharePoint document location exists for a particular row, it's going to show that particular folder from SharePoint, the documents and the folders within that particular folder. So a couple things to know is that you do have to use the default SharePoint site. So even though you can in Dataverse configure multiple SharePoint sites, Power Pages relies on the default SharePoint site. And the other big thing to know is that while it is possible in a model-driven app to have multiple document locations associated with a single row in Dataverse, Power Pages only works with one document location. So if there are multiple, the way that the integration works is that it will take whichever one was created first. So you have to kind of keep in mind if you're going to leverage this integration and you do know you're going to have multiple document locations, you always want to make sure that whatever one's going to be used for your Power Pages site is created first. So something to know about that. The other thing you can use for document management is web files. So web files are how we, you're generally adding attachments or images to your Power Pages site. Those have remained roughly the same. The biggest thing is that in the enhanced data model, the files are actually stored using file columns, not notes. So in the standard data model, I think it's still notes last time I checked. So if you're uploading a file, you upload it as an attachment in a note, whereas in the enhanced data model, they're now using the file column type to store the note. So just a little bit of a change of the underlying way that the file is actually stored in Dataverse. Okay, so those are, we kind of covered what really hasn't changed. We've talked about a few things that have changed a little bit. But what I want to talk about next was what has changed since we last chatted. So in December 2021, what we didn't have were file and image columns. So if you file and image columns, I think probably they may have existed at that point. I don't honestly remember exactly when they were introduced, but even if they did exist in Dataverse, they were not yet supported on Power Pages. So essentially, if you wanted to have I want to upload a single file to a particular record and you added those columns to your form, Power Pages essentially ignored them. So file and image columns are supported on the form, so multi-step forms, basic forms. The big thing to know is if you haven't used them already, is that they don't work on the insert. So if you're creating a new record, if you're using the insert type of step or form, then the image column or the file column won't be there. That's similar to the fact that, say, a subgrid won't be there on an insert either. And the idea is essentially is like you can't add an image or you can't add a row to a record that doesn't exist yet. So I think that's somewhat mirroring the experience a little bit that we have in model-driven apps, but essentially on insert, your file and image columns won't be there. So if you do want to leverage the file and image columns via forms, you do have to, it has to be on an edit, essentially. The web API also supports file and image columns, so you can add records. So if you do have the requirement that as part of an insert of a record, you need to upload a file, you can kind of do it yourself using the web API, as well as you can access the details about an image and file column using Liquid. So one of the things you can do is if you have an image column, you can get the URL for that particular image so that you can just display it as well. So file and image columns are, like I said, supported across Forms, Web API, and Liquid. So I did want to just quickly show what that looks like. So in my site here, I'm gonna preview this, see if this thing will load. So in my example here, where I have my golf courses app, what I did was I added both a file and an image column to the form. So we'll see what that looks like. So I am logged in here. So you'll see if I go and open up this one here, you can see here that here's my image. So the fact that I've already selected image in this case, so you'll see it does a little preview for me. I can delete this, I can add a new one, and same with this one. So this one's a file. So if I select a file here, it's not going to have any sort of preview. It's just going to give you the name of the file. But for an image column, it is going to give us a preview of the image as well. So that's kind of nice. And so this is great when you know that there's just going to be, you need to capture a file or an image in one particular column. And so so this isn't like, when we talk about the kind of the classic use case of case management, file and image columns are probably not going to be as helpful there because you don't know how many images or how many files you want the user to upload. They might have 4 or 5. So that's where notes and activities are still a great place or still a good feature to use. But let's just say you're saying, hey, I want them to upload this specific contract, or I want them to upload this specific logo, and you're going to save that in one particular column. This is a super, super useful feature. Now, if I go back to my list here and I do a create, you'll see that you'll get this message. So this record hasn't been created yet. To enable image upload, create this record. So this shows you that the images and files are not supported when you're trying to insert a record. I got a question here. So have I tried using Liquid of an image column? Just had a topic in the forums where the fetch delivered blank in all attributes. I feel like I did play around with it. I haven't honestly played around with it in, I'm trying to think of whether that was in Liquid or the web API. But no, I guess, yeah, Lucas is saying that if you use the image column in Liquid, it's delivering blank in all the attributes. I haven't personally run into that, but to be honest, I can't remember the last time I did it myself. So that very well is probably the case, but I don't have, unfortunately, any other details than that. Yeah, so we've got our image columns here that, like I said, aren't available on the insert. But I mean, this is super quick to add if you're looking to have someone upload images having someone upload files. You create your column in Dataverse, you add it to the form. There's no extra permissions that are required in terms of table permissions. There's no form metadata that's required. It's really quite simple. You literally just add the column to the form and everything else just works. So that's pretty nice. The files are uploaded into the file column in Dataverse. That file column is going to consume your file storage space, not your database space. So that's another nice thing. And yeah, it's really quite slick. It may not be the best experience if you're trying to upload 1 GB files, because the upload is a kind of a it just saves as part of the so if I were to open up this one, when you select a file, it's going to be a post as part of the save of the entire form. So yeah, it's not going to be pretty if you want to upload a 1 GB file. So if you have large files that you're looking to do, this out of the box experience may not be the what you're wanting to go with. But yeah, it does, I think, it's good for things if you're talking like, a few megabytes, 10 megabytes, that's not going to be a problem. I think the limit might be 125 megabytes. I think there's some different limits. I can never kind of remember between, there's the limit on SharePoint, limit on file columns, but I seem to recall it's 125 megabytes that it's going to support there. So yeah, so again, it's a great feature, very simple to set up, very simple to use. And I think that's going to solve a lot of people's challenges with notes where it was just always kind of a bit of an odd thing. If you knew you just needed a single file, if you had a specific requirement to ask someone to upload a note and then to be able to run business logic on, have they filled out, have they provided us with this file yet? You can't really do that when it's a note. You have to, it can be tricky. So the ability to say, hey, here's a file, here's a specific column that we're going to fill in, I think is a great option. Ryan's asking, can the full-size image be displayed on a page reading from the Dataverse image column? View read scenarios, not just upload scenario, not just the preview of the image. I believe that would require a little bit of custom JavaScript, because I believe that you can get the URL of the image, which I don't think is the preview. But out of the box, I think it's just a preview. But otherwise, like if you're using Liquid, you can get the URL of the image. Not this one, because you've got the image URL. So they've given you kind of the form of it. So you could use some JavaScript to do that. You can use the Liquid to get that URL and then place it on the page. So not out of the box, but I think with a little bit of JavaScript and potentially some Liquid, you could achieve that. Okay. Next, the Power Automate integration. So honestly, if Microsoft hadn't provided us this example, I don't even know if I would have thought to kind of mention this here. But with the integration that is now available with Power Automate, where you can execute, or you can basically fire a Power Automate Cloudflow using the Power Pages web API. The example they gave us is actually doing like an image library. So let's just take a quick look at how that works. So that's this one here. So what they do is they've created a Cloudflow, or they've created a few Cloudflows that allow you to, that basically can accept a file, because one of the things you can do with a Cloudflow is you can have inputs from Power Pages, and one of those types of inputs is file. So essentially what you can have is a Power Automate flow that accepts an image, and then because that flow can kind of do whatever, all the cool things that Power Automate can do, it can then take that image and save it to, say, a OneDrive or a SharePoint location. So by writing some JavaScript that allows a user to select a file, then triggers a Power Automate flow that passes an image. You can then save it to a location. So that's what that first thing is. Now, the other flow that they give you is a flow that then retrieves a list of all the files that have saved, including their URL. So, and then they also have a delete, and then they've got a whole bunch of JavaScript and HTML to make that work. But essentially the idea here is because one of the inputs and output parameters that is offered with the Power Automate integration, you can essentially build an image gallery with Power Automate. So it's a really cool example. If you're not quite following along with what I'm saying here, I would recommend kind of stepping through this. You get to learn about how the integration between Power Automate and Power Pages works. This video is outlines it pretty well. But this is all because one of the input types that Power Pages or Power Automate accepts from Power Pages when you're executing the Cloudflow is a file. So you can essentially pass it the image, have it save, and then you can retrieve the URLs back. So I just wanted to mention that because it is somewhat file related. So there's lots of interesting scenarios. If you need to have your files uploaded to somewhere that's not Dataverse, Power Automate can be the way to do it. It can really, like, I think there's, last I read, over 900 connectors. You can build custom connectors, all that sort of stuff. So the input type, like the fact that you can pass a file parameter to Power Automate, opens up a whole host of possibilities there. I see a question from Dave here. Can you add multiple file fields to one table? Yes, sir. Yeah, Dave, you can essentially have, I don't want to say unlimited because I think there's still a theoretical limit to the number of columns that can be added on a particular table. But yeah, you could probably add dozens, if not hundreds of image and or file columns to a table. And yeah, those should all be supported on Power Pages. As many as are practical, I'd say. So yeah, like I said, I recommend that you take a look at how you do, how this works. But like I said, it involves the integration between Power Pages and Power Automate and leveraging that parameter type that you can pass as an image. Basically, you capture the file in the browser, send it to Power Automate. Power Automate then saves it somewhere, and then to display them, you can run another Power Cloudflow that retrieves all the files that are there, gives you the URL, and then you can display them in an image gallery. Okay, just a comment here from Lucas. Just to mention, there currently is a strange setting if you use the Power Pages trigger and connect it to a different database to store things in SQL or Oracle. Make sure that the connection is set to run as the connection and not as the user owner, currently the strange default. Oh, interesting. So it sounds like make sure that the connection, is set to run as the connection and not as the user owner. I'm assuming that's the connection to the, another database. So yeah, so it sounds like if you're creating a Power Page, if you're using the Power Pages trigger, which you need to invoke it from the API, you want to make sure you are setting the connection owner as on that connection to your third-party databases. Kim says, can you talk about the space taken by the file and images again? Where do you check the storage capacity? All right, let me go. So the place you check the storage capacity is in admin.powerplatform.microsoft.com. So let's see what I got here. So if I go into my resources and I go to capacity, I can see for all my different environments what I have. Now I'm just using the developer one, so that's why you're not seeing anything here. But essentially the Dataverse capacity is grouped into 3 different buckets. So there's database, file, and log. So log is all for like the different auditing and different logging. That makes sense. That's why it's called log. File is used for things like when files are saved as notes, as attachments, file columns, image columns. There's a few different things. And what's cool is that underneath the scenes, that's actually being stored in Azure Blob Storage. And that's why it is cheaper. So you pay a different price. If you want to add more database capacity, or if you want to add more file capacity, there's a different price. And the file capacity is much cheaper than the database capacity. So that's why it's important that when we're using these techniques, if we're storing files in file columns, great. If you store it in a giant if you serialize it and store it in a text field, that's going to be consuming database, and that's where it can get really crazy. Now, when we talked about the SharePoint integration, SharePoint doesn't consume any of this space because the files are actually residing in SharePoint. So that's why, many years ago, database storage was the only option, and it was pretty expensive. It used to be back in the day that everything was just stored in the database. There was no different pricing change between all the different file storage. So Dataverse was a relatively expensive place to store a whole lot of files. It's still not the cheapest place to store your files. Like SharePoint still is cheaper. Azure Blob Storage is cheaper, but it's much more kind of in line, or much more reasonable now. So you can, like before, it was almost a no-brainer. You just never want to store those things in Dataverse because it would cost too much. Now it's back to it may not be worth it to move them somewhere else because the storage in Dataverse is reasonable. So yeah, this is going to check, and then you can check per instance as well. You can see that I've got these ones, again, because that's my default environment. They're both developer environments that I have in here. So that's why they're not actually consuming any particular storage. But this is where you would check if you do. And so you earn capacity in these based on how many licenses you have. And if the licenses don't give you enough storage, then you can buy them individually as well. So you can buy file storage or buy database storage as well. Okay, question from Felix. Is an iframe the best way to render an image file on Power Pages so we don't open on separate tabs? A file, yes, probably, like depending on which file type that you want. I mean, if it's an image, I would just be using an image tag. But yeah, if you're trying to show like a PDF in line, then typically iframe would be the option. Larry's asking, what's the approximate relative cost of file storage versus SharePoint file storage versus SharePoint versus Azure Blob? So it used to be, when I said it used to be really expensive, it used to be like database storage is like $50 per month per gigabyte. The file storage, I think, is dollars. On Azure Blob Storage, it's pennies, I think, per gigabyte. And I think SharePoint is kind of somewhere in between there. So I believe it kind of goes, the most expensive is the database storage, then file storage in Dataverse, then SharePoint, then Azure Blob Storage. So I think there's somewhat of a kind of an order of magnitude step between all of those. But you often get lots of, like with SharePoint, I think you start with like terabytes of stuff, whereas with Dataverse, unless you have 100,000 users or 10,000 users, you don't get as much. So you don't get, if you want to store a terabyte worth of data in Dataverse, that can get pretty pricey. Whereas if you're storing that in Azure Blob Storage, it's quite reasonable. It's could be tens of dollars versus thousands of dollars. Like we've got clients who spend thousands of dollars every month on Dataverse storage, and we've got some clients that spend hundreds of dollars on Azure Blob Storage, but of course they're storing terabytes and terabytes of information. So okay. So one last topic here, and so this is a topic that existed back in the day. I just didn't really, I don't even know. I probably forgot to cover it last time. But just as I was kind of going through and prepping for this, I realized I didn't talk about this one. So, and this is the idea that, again, kind of going back to the cost conversation, if you had a whole bunch of web files that you wanted to put on your site, or if you were expecting that people would be uploading lots and lots of files to notes and attachments, there's an option to actually have those notes and attachments not saved in Dataverse, but stored directly in Azure Blob Storage. So that file doesn't exist at all in Blob Storage or in Dataverse. Essentially, it creates a note record, and that note record it's a text file that points to the Azure Blob Storage. So let me just kind of show you how that works. I'm going to load this up here. So if I go to the bottom here, so you can see here I've got my notes section here. So if I say I want to add a note, and I say whatever here, just gotta find a file here. So I've chosen a file here. I'm going to click a note, and I click add note. We can see here that I've added a note. There's my screenshot. The user would never know that this isn't stored anywhere other than in the notes in Dataverse. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go behind the scenes here. I'm going to actually switch over to my other app here. And which golf course was I on? Cook. So if I go into this course and I scroll down here and I look at the notes, so the notes are here, you'll see that my image isn't actually an image, it's a text file. And you can see what this text file contains is the name, size, type, and the URL to my Azure Storage blob. So I'm going to go over to my Azure Storage. See my expired Azure session. So you can see in here, in my Azure Storage blob, I have this container, and we've got we've got two in here. Open that one up, and there you can see this is where my file physically resides. So I can download it from here if I need to, and then I can also get it from here. So when I click on this, what the portal's code is actually doing is it's grabbing the file from Azure Storage versus grabbing it from Dataverse. So again, the cost of Azure Storage compared to even the file storage costs in Dataverse is, there's a relatively significant difference there. So if you think that you're going to be storing, gigs and gigs and gigs and gigs of data, then we're using this integration might be worthwhile. And it's honestly very easy to set up. So I'll just quickly show you how that works. Essentially, there's some settings that you need to set up. So you go in here and you'll see that we've got the file storage / cloud account storage. And this right here is a connection string that you grab from your Azure storage here. So I just created a new kind of a basic file storage thing and then grab the keys from the connection string from here. And so you basically just paste that in there, and then you tell it which container to go into. Then if you're editing your basic form, this one would be called golf course. Then what you do when you set up your yes, classic mistake, clicking on the wrong thing. Okay, I'm not going to click on that name. I'm going to click on the row. So when you're setting up your form metadata, you have this option here for file attachment location, and you can basically flip it between notes, attachments, and Azure Blob Storage. So as soon as you do that, away it goes. Now, as I mentioned, when you go in and actually open this up here, let's say if you built this into a customer support portal, and you had your customer agents in the back end viewing these notes, and it's obviously not that helpful for them to get a link to an Azure or to a text file that tells them where the file is. There is a web resource, so you can actually replace the notes control with a custom one that's provided by the portals team that will actually give you not the text file, but when you click on it, will actually open up the real file itself. So I haven't added it to this form in particular, but you can use that thing and it will essentially replace this link with an actual link to the file so that you have the direct access to it. So that's kind of an additional thing you can do by basically just using it's a web resource that you can place on the page that's provided within the solutions, so you can add to your form. There's a couple of core settings that you got to add, but for the most part, it's a pretty straightforward process as well. So again, enabling this is as simple as just putting in those site settings for basically how it connects to the Azure storage location, and then for that particular form saying, hey, I want these stored in Azure Blob Storage. Do note that this is using settings and not site settings. What that means is that you can only have kind of one per Dataverse instance because settings are not site specifics. So that is one kind of downside of this is that if for whatever reason you had different sites and you wanted them to have different locations, that's not really possible. Yeah, if you create them in site settings, these are not going to be that helpful. So you got to create them in the settings area, not site settings. Okay. So like I said, that option is great if you think you're going to have massive amounts of data, and then the cost to set that up is pretty minimal. And you can have your files over there. There may be other reasons that you want your files in Azure Storage or in Azure Blob Storage. So it's a cool option. I do know, I hear lots of people do use that. So something to consider as well. Okay, so that covers the topics that I want to go through. So I will let everyone know that our next call will be on February 15th at the same time, 3 p.m. Eastern. Again, thank you to Jason and the team over there at MS Dynamics World. We will open it up to see if there's any Q&A. I think I've answered the question. I see my old friend Ryan Monks has said that the Azure Blob Storage that he has approximately 3 gigabytes of files, and they pay 29 cents a month. So pretty expensive. I'm just gonna get a rough admin.microsoft. I'm gonna see if I can get a rough price. I think the file storage is it's in the dollars per month. So if you're looking at based on that pricing, you're talking 10 cents a gigabyte, and then this other one might be $1 a gigabyte or something. But let me just see if I can. So Felix is wondering, with Azure Storage Blob, can we upload file from Power Page? Yeah, so what I just showed was you upload it, what appears to be a note, but it actually does store it in Azure Storage Blob. So yes, you can upload directly from Power Pages in there. If you wanted to build a custom integration, you could also probably do that where it uploads it directly to Azure Storage Blobs. You'd have to be concerned about security there a little bit, depending on kind of who the people are and what kind of resources they'd have to have access to. Just trying to see here if I can get us a quick price on select the billing account. Dynamics 365. Probably some Power Platform business apps. Power Automate, Power Pages View, AI Builder, Dataverse. Nothing in there. Add-ons maybe. Business apps.
Hey, Nick, you know we're not seeing your screen, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, so here we go. So, so just to give you a rough idea, these are Canadian dollars because that's what I've got. So the database capacity is basically about $50 per gigabyte per month. The file capacity is $2.70, so probably about $2 US basically. So as compared to the Azure Blob Storage, it's kind of like it's an order of magnitude. So 10 times more expensive, but then database storage is 10 times more than that. To be honest, I'm not sure what the SharePoint. I don't know if there would be any SharePoint pricing in here. SharePoint. Yeah, I don't have any pricing on that, but yeah, like I know, like I think you start with like a terabyte of, so you get a lot of storage with SharePoint. So my guess is it's somewhere between the couple of dollars that it costs per gigabyte for file storage in Dataverse versus the 10 cents a gigabyte or somewhere in that range, pennies per gigabyte that you get in Azure Blob Storage. I'd suspect it'd be somewhere in there. Lucas asks, do you know when Power Pages billing option will become available in more regions? I wasn't aware that wasn't available in all regions. As far as I know, Power Pages should be the only thing available in new ones. So, Lucas, I guess let me know if there's a specific region where you can't access Power Pages billing. Like I don't know if you still only have access to Power Apps Portals licensing or how that's working, but my understanding was as soon as it went GA, that should have been all out there. So Felix is asking, downloading from Power Pages, do you need some liquid to achieve it, or will it just natively work? Felix, I'm assuming from the Azure Blob Storage, and so if you're using the out-of-the-box integration that I showed where you upload it and it uploads it directly to Azure Blob Storage, the downloading works the same way. So it doesn't require any additional work there, but okay, I don't see, I think that might be the end of the questions. Yes, okay, I don't see any more questions. I think I've answered them all. So I think, Jason, we could probably wrap it up there.
All right, well, great job as usual. Thanks to everyone in the audience for all your questions too. Really appreciate it. We will be sending out a recording soon. I think with that, we can start to wrap up here. Thanks for the additional comments. Yeah, Nick, really appreciate it.
All right, thanks everyone.
Bye.